I was seated at table 12, tucked behind a monstrous bouquet of flowers that could have hidden an entire aircraft. It was my daughter's wedding day, and apparently the organizers, or perhaps my new in-laws, thought it best to keep me half invisible. I smiled anyway, because I had learned long ago that invisibility could be the most dangerous camouflage. The world saw a silver-haired widow in a modest gray dress and pearls, the very picture of quiet resignation. What they didn't know was that I had been practicing the art of being underestimated for years. From behind my floral fortress, I watched my daughter Emma glide through the room in great-grandmother's lace, her face glowing with the kind of joy only a bride can radiate. She looked breathtaking, and for a moment, despite everything, I felt proud. But that pride soured quickly when Marcus's family made their entrance. Patricia, his mother, floated in dripping with diamonds, shaking hands with the important guests as though she were royalty. She glanced over me once, and then past me like I was just another chair in the room. I knew instantly what kind of people I was dealing with. Then came Marcus himself, flashing a smile so dazzling it could blind a saint. I noticed something others seemed to miss. He had different smiles for different people. The wide, confident grin for the wealthy. The polite, restrained one for the useful. And for the rest, indifference so sharp it cut. When he finally turned that blinding grin on me, I braced myself. "Mrs. Hartley," he said, his voice dripping with charm. "Isn't this magical? You must be bursting with pride." "Oh, I'm practically vibrating with maternal joy," I answered sweetly, though my voice carried more bite than sugar. He didn't flinch. Men like Marcus rarely did. He leaned in with that polished confidence. "We should spend some time together soon. Really get to know each other. Most people forge connections before marriage. Marcus preferred to do things backwards. He suggested dinner, just the two of us." The way he said it, family collaboration, made my stomach twist. I agreed, smiling like a southern belle with a secret, though inside I knew exactly what game he was playing. The reception wore on, but I could see his calculated charm at work. He floated from guest to guest, molding himself into whatever version they wanted to see. And when he glanced at me again across the room, I saw a flicker in his eyes, a calculation. He thought I was an easy mark, a harmless widow ripe for manipulation. Oh, poor Marcus. He had no idea who he was dealing with. 2 days later, Emma was already calling me, her voice bubbling with excitement. Marcus was so thoughtful, she said, always thinking about their future, always talking about security. Security. That word hung between us like smoke before a fire. I knew better than most that when a man can't stop talking about money, it's not love he's protecting, it's ambition. By Thursday, I found myself at a restaurant with Marcus, the kind of place where the waiters pronounced water in French and the prices made you feel small. He rose to greet me, overflowing with charm. "Sylvia, you look radiant." I settled into the chair, my modest black dress and broken watch completing the illusion of vulnerability. He wasted no time circling the topic he wanted: my finances, my independence, the looming fear that someone could take advantage of me. His concern was so well rehearsed, it could have been printed in a manual for predators. Then came the folder. Thick papers slid across the table like a snake in disguise. Power of attorney. Medical authority. Financial oversight. In one stroke, I would sign away my life to him. "Emma thinks this is brilliant," he added, his voice laced with false reassurance. I smiled, but inside I was cataloging every word, every tactic. He was clever, I'll grant him that. He cloaked theft in the language of protection. He pressed urgency like it was a matter of life and death, suggesting I act quickly before questions arose about my capacity. He was already laying the foundation to declare me incompetent. I closed the folder, gently placing my hands over it like I was saying grace. "This requires careful consideration," I said. Relief spread across his face like he'd just secured a deal. But when I mentioned bringing in my own lawyer, the flicker of annoyance cracked his mask. He tried to recover, but I had already seen it. Later that week, he insisted on visiting me at home. That was when the performance shifted. He spread papers across my coffee table, filling my living room with the weight of his plans. But I had questions of my own. "In what field exactly is your business experience?" I asked. he stammered. Independent advisor, he said vaguely. The cracks widened. His charm faltered. And when I pressed harder, how many elderly people had he helped? How many had requested his guidance? His mask split entirely. I told him the truth then. That I knew exactly what he was doing. That I had already set traps of my own. His face went pale, his voice cracking as he insisted I couldn't prove anything. But I had proof. I had private investigators, attorneys, and recordings. I had the truth of his debts, his gambling, and his lies. He left that night in panic, his plan collapsing around him like wet paper. I poured myself a glass of wine, savoring the memory of his eyes, when he realized the helpless widow was a predator far more dangerous than he had imagined. The next morning, I stood at the top of the basement stairs with Robert's old key in my hand. For 2 years since his death, I had avoided opening the safe. I had been too broken to face whatever he might have left behind. But Marcus's arrogance had given me courage. When I opened that safe, I found documents that made my hands tremble. Bank accounts I never knew existed, investments hidden for decades, and at the very bottom a letter in Robert's familiar hand. "My dearest Sylvia," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I am gone, and someone is trying to take advantage of you. I am sorry I never told you about the money. $33 million properly protected and completely yours. I lived modestly so we could die wealthy. Don't let anyone steal what I spent 40 years building. Use every penny if you have to. Make them regret the day they decided to mess with my wife." My heart pounded as the words sank in. 33 million. The truth was more powerful than I ever imagined. Marcus thought he was circling a lamb. He had stumbled upon a dragon's lair. I sat for hours in that basement, staring at Robert's letter, until the words blurred through my tears. For years I had lived modestly, even frugally, thinking that what he left me was little more than the house, a pension, and some savings. And now here I was, holding the truth in my trembling hands, $33 million safeguarded and hidden so carefully that even I hadn't known. My husband had protected me not just with love, but with foresight sharp enough to cut through the greed of men like Marcus. At the bottom of the envelope was a card, "Carol Peterson, attorney at law." My fingers shook as I dialed. A woman answered, her tone brisk, almost expectant. "Peterson Law Office." "This is Sylvia Hartley," I said softly. "I believe my husband arranged for you to assist me." There was the briefest pause before her voice warmed. "Mrs. Hartley, I've been waiting for this call for 2 years. Can you come in today?" That very afternoon, I was sitting in her office, a room filled with sunlight and law books, not at all the gloomy chamber I'd imagined. Carol was younger than I expected, with eyes like sharpened steel. She spread out the trust documents on her desk. "Your husband was remarkably prudent. He predicted that within 2 years of his death, someone would approach you, likely through family, trying to take control of what they believed were modest assets." I could only shake my head in disbelief. "And the truth, $33 million, she said calmly, "all secured in an irrevocable trust that only you control. Not even a signed power of attorney could give someone else access." Relief washed over me so fiercely that I had to grip the edge of her desk. Marcus had no idea that his elaborate scheme was useless from the start. But Carol wasn't finished. She leaned closer, her voice low. "More importantly, Mrs. Hartley, you now have the resources to destroy him." That word, destroy, settled into me like fire. She laid out the plan: criminal charges, civil suits, and investigation into every one of Marcus's financial dealings. "Men like him don't work alone," she explained. "We'll uncover the entire network." That night, when Emma called, her voice was tinged with confusion. "Mom, Marcus seems upset. He won't tell me why." "Oh, sweetheart," I said gently. "We had a fascinating conversation about my future." "What kind of conversation?" "The kind that assumes I'm too stupid to protect myself." There was silence on the line. "Mom, you're scaring me." "Good," I whispered. "It's about time someone was scared." The following days were a blur of planning. Carol introduced me to Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed prosecutor who specialized in elder fraud. Together, they hatched a trap. I was to call Marcus, pretending to have reconsidered. I would invite him over, let him bring his notary, and pretend to sign. Hidden cameras would capture everything. On Monday morning, I dialed his number with my best shaky widow's voice. Marcus, dear, I've been thinking. Perhaps you were right. I'd like to move forward with those papers. His relief was palpable, like a man tasting water after days in the desert. That's wonderful, Sylvia. I can have everything ready this afternoon. When he arrived at 3 o'clock, briefcase in hand, his smile was the most genuine I had ever seen. He spread the papers across my coffee table, his notary seated beside him, pen at the ready. "This is the best decision you'll ever make," he said earnestly. "Once you sign Emma, and I can protect you completely." I let my hand tremble as I signed the first page, then paused. "Marcus, what happens to my money after this?" "It will be professionally managed," he replied smoothly. "You'll never have to worry again. People like Emma and me, we know how to handle these things. And if I change my mind?" "Well," he said carefully, "that would depend on your mental state at the time. These arrangements are designed to be permanent." Permanent. The word hung in the air like a noose. I signed a second page, then set the pen down and looked him squarely in the eye. "Marcus," I said softly, "I think there might be more money than you realize. Robert may have had hidden accounts." His eyes lit up like a greedy child on Christmas morning. "More? How much more?" I leaned back, folded my hands, and let the silence stretch until his eagerness was unbearable. Enough to make this very interesting. And then before he could speak again, the living room erupted. Police officers stepped out from behind curtains, cameras flashed, and Marcus's face drained of blood. "Marcus Thornfield," an officer declared, "you're under arrest for attempted elder fraud." He sputtered, enraged, "You can't. This is entrapment." I smiled sweetly as they cuffed him. "No, dear, this is justice." That night, I poured myself another glass of Robert's best wine and sat in the quiet. I thought about his letter, his foresight, and the trap he had armed me with long before Marcus ever arrived. My husband had given me more than money, he had given me permission to be dangerous, and I had just proven how dangerous a widow could be. The news broke that evening, Marcus's face plastered across every local channel as they replayed his arrest. He looked small, diminished, caught between rage and disbelief. The headlines read, "Local businessman arrested in elder fraud sting operation." I sat in my living room, the glow of the television painting shadows across the walls, and felt the strangest mix of triumph and sorrow. Emma's call came moments later, her voice thick with tears. "Mom, what have you done? You've ruined him." I swallowed hard. "No, sweetheart. I've protected myself. He tried to steal everything your father left me." She sobbed, refusing to hear, clinging to the illusion that her husband's charm had been real. But an hour later, when she appeared at my door with red-rimmed eyes, I pressed play on the recording. Every greedy word Marcus had spoken spilled into the room, his voice dripping with the arrogance of someone who thought he had already won. Emma crumbled as she listened, her denial dissolving under the weight of undeniable truth. "He was going to put me in a nursing home," I told her softly. "He was going to strip me of my independence and my dignity." Her face twisted with horror. "But he loved me." "No, darling," I said gently, taking her trembling hand. "He loved what he thought you could give him." Days turned into weeks, and Marcus's downfall unraveled like a tightly pulled thread. His debts surfaced, first gambling, bad investments, fake ventures. The facade of wealth collapsed, exposing the rot beneath. His father stormed into my house one afternoon, demanding answers, his voice full of fury. "You've destroyed my son's life over a misunderstanding," he barked. "A misunderstanding," I shot back. "He tried to rob me of my independence. He plotted to erase me while smiling across my dinner table." He blustered, insisting Marcus had only been trying to help. But the recordings didn't lie, and neither did the evidence. What they called help was nothing but theft wrapped in false concern. When Marcus stood before a judge for his bail hearing, his lawyer spun stories about a family miscommunication about love, twisted into suspicion. But the evidence was a hammer, and the judge saw through the performance. Bail was set at $500,000 money Marcus did not have. He would sit in a cell until trial. It was then that Carol brought more astonishing news. "The FBI is interested in his case," she said, her voice calm, but charged with energy. "They believe Marcus is connected to a multi-state elder fraud network." The scope of it made me sick. Dozens of victims, millions stolen lives ruined by men just like him. Yet there was also a grim satisfaction. If Marcus was part of something larger, his downfall would be the stone that brought down the entire rotten structure. Emma, meanwhile, struggled with grief of another kind. She came to me one evening, her face pale. "Mom, I think I have to leave him. I can't stay married to someone who would do this to you." "It's your decision, sweetheart," I told her. "But make it knowing the truth. Don't let lies bind you to a man who only saw you as a means to an end." A week later, she filed for divorce, the papers citing irreconcilable differences. She packed her life into boxes and moved into a small apartment near mine. I watched her grow stronger through the heartbreak, her innocence burning away to reveal something fiercer. The trial began in September, and Marcus sat in the courtroom like a hollow version of the man who once flashed confident smiles across my kitchen table. His lawyer tried every defense: entrapment, diminished capacity, even love twisted into error. But when the recordings played, when the jury heard his calculated words about declaring me incompetent, the room turned cold against him. The verdict came quickly: guilty on all counts. And when the judge sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison, I felt a release I hadn't realized I was holding. He looked at me with pure hatred. As they led him away, his voice a venomous hiss. "This isn't over, old woman." I smiled, my voice steady. "Yes, it is." That night, Carol and I returned to the same restaurant where Marcus had once tried to charm me into signing away my life. We toasted with wine that tasted of victory and resolve. "Do you realize," she said, "you've become a legend in elder law circles, the widow who fought back and won?" I let the words sink in, not with vanity but with purpose. Robert had left me a fortune, not to squander on comfort, but to protect myself, and perhaps to protect others too. I thought of the victims Marcus had manipulated before me, the lives ruined, the elderly stripped of dignity. That night, I made myself a promise: his downfall would not be the end. It would be the beginning of a war. The weeks after the trial felt like living inside a storm that had finally broken, leaving devastation and silence in its wake. Marcus sat in prison, his name dragged through every headline, his polished mask shattered forever. But if I thought his downfall would end the intrusion of the Thornfield family, I was mistaken. Patricia arrived at my door one Tuesday morning, still adorned with jewelry that gleamed a little less than before, her clothes pressed but outdated, her poise fractured beneath the weight of desperation. "Sylvia," she said, sweeping past me into the living room without waiting for permission. "We need to discuss this unfortunate situation." I let her speak, curious about which mask she'd wear. Dignity, guilt, fury. What I saw was something far simpler: fear. "This vendetta against Marcus has gone too far," she declared, her voice trembling, despite her attempt at authority. "He made a mistake, yes, but destroying his life over one error is cruel." "One error," I replied, my words like ice. "Patricia, your son has been systematically robbing elderly women for years. That isn't a mistake, it's a business model." Her composure cracked, then the tremor in her voice betraying more than grief for her son. "The family is suffering because of your actions. We're losing everything: the house, the business, our reputation." There it was. Not sorrow for victims, not remorse for crimes, but fear of losing status. "Tragic," I said softly. "I'm sure the women he stole from would weep to hear about your inconvenience." She pressed forward, eyes flashing. "What do you want from us?" "Money. A public apology. Surely we can come to some arrangement." I studied her carefully. Here was the matriarch of a family that had raised a predator, bargaining like I was haggling over fabric at a market. "There is one thing you can do," I said finally. Her eyes lit with hope. "What?" "Disappear. Move away. Change your name. And make certain no member of your family ever preys on another vulnerable person again." Her mouth fell open, the mask collapsing entirely. She left in silence, dignity abandoned on my doorstep. But Patricia was only the first. Days later, Richard, Marcus's slick former business partner, appeared in my living room offering information about the network. Names, amounts, methods. We could help each other, he insisted. In exchange for what I asked, though, I already knew the answer. Leniency. Perhaps a reduced sentence for Marcus. I laughed outright, the sound startling even me. Richard let me explain something very clearly. I don't negotiate with criminals, I destroy them. He paled. You're making a mistake. We could be allies. No, you could be an inmate, which incidentally is exactly what you're about to become. By Friday, Richard was under federal investigation, his own associates turning against him. One by one, Marcus's circle crumbled real estate agents who laundered stolen money, lawyers who crafted fraudulent documents, even bankers who helped shuffle the assets of widows and pensioners. Each arrived at my door hoping to bargain. Each I sent directly to Carol and the FBI. You're building quite the reputation, Carol remarked during one of our weekly meetings, her lips curling into a rare smile. Word is spreading. They're warning each other now. Targeting you, Sylvia, was Marcus's fatal mistake. Good, I said, sipping my coffee. Fear is the best deterrent. The prosecutor's office agreed. My case, they said, was revolutionizing how elder fraud was prosecuted. No longer seen as isolated cons, these crimes were now recognized as organized enterprises with networks that spanned states. And with every arrest, more victims came forward, 37 so far, losses totaling over $12 million. The number stunned me. 12 million stolen from those who had trusted the wrong person. Can they get their money back, I asked. Most of it, Carol assured me. Federal asset forfeiture laws are powerful when criminal enterprises are involved, and Marcus's personal assets will be liquidated, his cars, his jewelry, the house. The proceeds will go to victims. What about me, I asked, though the question felt hollow. I was never financially defrauded, which means your share technically is substantial. Then it goes to the others, I said immediately. They need it more than I do. That evening, Emma came over for dinner. Her divorce finalized, her eyes brighter than they had been in months. I feel so stupid, she confessed, stirring her tea. You trusted someone you loved, I told her. That isn't stupidity, it's humanity. But when you learn the truth, you chose justice over comfort. That's not weakness, Emma, that's courage. Her hand slipped into mine across the table. Did you ever feel afraid that his friends might retaliate? I thought of the security measures now surrounding my life, the agents who answered my calls, the very public nature of Marcus's downfall. I smiled. Let them try. I'm not the helpless widow they think I am. She laughed then, a soft, tentative sound, but real. And for the first time in months, I saw in her a spark of the same steel Robert had always seen in me. But as I watched her leave that night, I knew this was only the beginning. Marcus's conviction had exposed a wound far larger than I had imagined. And with Robert's wealth, with his letter still burning in my heart, I had both the resources and the resolve to ensure no other widow would ever have to suffer what Marcus had planned for me. This was no longer about survival, it was about war. The months that followed carried the weight of both vindication and responsibility. Marcus sat in federal prison, his polished confidence stripped bare, his name reduced to a warning whispered among predators, the Thornfield disaster. But his downfall had opened doors I hadn't even known existed. Federal prosecutors invited me into rooms I never imagined entering. They called my case the gold standard of elder fraud prosecution. Agents spread files across polished tables, maps of networks that spanned 6 states, with victims numbering in the dozens, teachers, veterans, widows, all stripped of their dignity by men like Marcus. The numbers chilled me: 39 victims, an average loss of $300,000 each, total damages creeping toward $15 million. Some of those victims had been forced into nursing homes, stripped not only of money, but of independence itself. 3 had died while their assets were drained. The injustice struck me like a physical blow. My voice trembled as I asked, "What can we do for them?" "For the dead, nothing," the prosecutor replied solemnly. "For the living, everything if you're willing to help." And so I did. Robert's fortune became more than protection. It became a weapon. I funded a program to provide legal support, financial counseling, and investigative resources. What began with my case grew into something larger, a network dedicated to hunting predators before they could strike. Within months, arrests spread across state lines and word traveled fast through criminal circles. Widows were no longer easy prey. Predators now whispered about the risk of encountering a Sylvia Hartley situation. Emma watched all this with cautious awe. She had rebuilt her life slowly, scarred but wiser. One evening, sitting together on my porch, she asked Mom, "Are you happy with how it turned out?" I thought about Robert's letter, about Marcus's twisted smile as the police led him away, about the women who had written to thank me for helping them reclaim their lives. "I'm proud," I said softly. "Not happy, perhaps, but proud." When Marcus's parole hearing arrived 5 years later, I sat in the small room, my navy suit crisp, my diamond earrings gleaming like armor. Marcus shuffled in, thinner, older bitterness etched into his face. His lawyer spoke of rehabilitation, of remorse, but when the board asked Marcus what he had learned, he sneered, that some people have more money than they deserve. The silence that followed was damning. I leaned forward. "And that I told the board is why Marcus Thornfield should serve his full sentence. He isn't rehabilitated. He's simply angry his prey had bigger teeth. Parole was denied. Marcus would remain caged by the consequences he had tried to outrun." But my war didn't end there. Congress called me to testify, cameras broadcasting my words across the country. I spoke not as a victim, but as proof that vulnerability can be a choice, and so can defiance. "Stealing an elderly person's independence is a life sentence for the victim," I told them. "The punishment should match the crime." The room erupted in applause, and in that moment I felt Robert's hand on my shoulder, unseen but certain. From there, the work grew. Programs expanded, predators fell, millions were recovered, and elderly victims who had once been silenced found their voices again. They called me a legend, a symbol, even a hero. But I knew better. I was simply a widow who had refused to be erased, armed with my husband's foresight and my own refusal to bend. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I stood in the East Room of the White House, a medal draped around my neck, as the president spoke my name. Cameras flashed, applause thundered, but all I thought about was the moment Robert had hidden that letter in the safe, trusting me with his final gift. He hadn't left me wealth for luxury. He had left me fire. And I had used it to burn down the very predators who thought me helpless. To anyone watching, I say this: trouble doesn't avoid you because you are polite. Predators don't retreat because you are gentle. Sometimes the only defense is to become more dangerous than those who hunt you. And if an old widow like me can do it, so can you. If this story touched you, if it made you think of someone you love who might be vulnerable, please don't let it end here. Share it so others can see. Subscribe for more stories of justice and survival, and leave a comment to tell me what you would have done in my place. Because our voices are weapons too, and together they're stronger than greed.